I'm gonna see if hopefully, oh, here we go. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Uh-oh, you're sideways. I'm this way.
Oh, do I need to, sorry, I didn't realize I could only use my phone for this. I was expecting to use my, so
No,
do I need to
fine.
do it this way, I guess?
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect. There we go.
okay, yeah, let me move this. I had to improvise, put this on my music stand. My phone is almost out of battery.
I know, mine
So
too.
I've got it,
Mine's
so I
literally
have
on the
like half of
charger.
it, I have it plugged in and like the cord is just barely on the other side of the lip of the music stand. So anyway, we'll try to make this work because I've never tried doing this. I haven't done a live stream for a long time, and every time I did one with someone, they were always in the room with me. So
Okay, yeah. Honestly, this is my first time too, so I'm glad it's like working out and you're here. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. I'm so excited. This is amazing.
absolutely.
Usually it's just me by myself sitting on my couch chatting about violin, but to have somebody else here is amazing. I'm so pumped. Um, I think it's gonna be super fun too. And this is
Sorry,
our
what?
first time meeting as well. So
Yes, yeah. No, I've seen your videos around. I mostly keep up with whoever's doing this stuff on YouTube, violin stuff on YouTube, and I've at least had friendly conversations with I think most people. So yeah, I think this is the first time we've ever spoken, but I've been familiar with your channel. So
amazing, amazing. Obviously, I've definitely stalked yours a ton. So honestly, I love your channel because I feel like
uh,
did I lose you?
just a minute here. Where'd I lose my camera? How do I? Sorry.
Uh-oh. I don't know. Hello, everybody joining. Welcome. We're here. Hopefully we didn't lose Tobias, but so far, so good.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you. I can't
Oh
see
gosh,
you.
what? How do I turn this? There it goes.
I still can't see you.
Okay, can you see me now?
No.
Interesting. Well, I can see. I don't know.
Oh no. I don't know what to tell you.
Should I click the link again?
Yeah, try it one more time.
That's weird because I can see myself in the screen here. All right, let me try this.
Hey, tell us in the comments, you guys. Can you see both of us? Is it just maybe my phone is being weird? There we go.
All right, yeah, turn it off, then turn it on again. Works every time.
Boom. Love it. Okay. Now, okay. So everyone was saying, yeah, they could just see me. Good. Okay, we're both here. Yeah. So what I was saying, I love your channel because I feel like you have such high level um advice for students that I absolutely love. So I feel like even when I watch your channel, I glean from it, even as a professional musician. So it's really cool to see that because I feel like I usually um gear my content towards like people that are first starting out on the violin, beginner, intermediate. So I love to see like the other side of it where it's a lot more advanced. But yeah, anyways, okay. I have some interview questions for you that we're going to start with, if that's okay. And
That
then
is fine.
we're going to get to questions that are in the chat. So if you guys are joining, welcome. We're going to start the live. I'm going to give Tobias some questions and then he's going to answer those. And then I'm going to go through the chat, answer as many of those questions. If you guys have questions, start putting them in now. I also have a few that people submitted earlier. I think there's just like 3 or 4. So we're going to run over those first, and then we're going to get to the chat. So put your questions in if you have any questions for Tobiah. We're going to get started. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us how you got into the violin. How old were you when you started? Like, just give us the rundown of like, where it all started.
Okay. Well, I started playing when I was around 6 or 7. It got started mostly because my mom's mom, my maternal grandmother, was a pianist. She's
Okay.
a professional pianist and a choir director. at a local Bible college in southern Missouri. And so, yeah, we were going to be involved in music one way or another. And I think my brother, I don't know if anyone has ever been to southern Missouri, will have heard of Branson. And you may have also heard of a theme park called Silver Dollar City, and which essentially it's like everything sort of is supposed to look like old west homesteads like style, but there's roller coasters. But they also have a lot of shows there, including especially fiddle shows. And
Yeah.
long time ago, my parents took either I was too young to remember, but if they took me, but my older brother, who's 4 years older than me, and he saw some fiddlers, and he was really intrigued by them. And my mom happened to know someone that was starting Suzuki Studio, so she decided to put him in violin. And then, of course, a few years later, they decided to put me in it. Yeah, so that's how I started doing violin.
Yeah.
And later we moved to, there was a little bit bigger, more official Suzuki studio that was being hosted by the local university. And yeah, we just started taking lessons. Started taking lessons there. My grandmother, whoops, my phone's about to fall off. My grandmother was one of the pianists, one of the accompanists for that program as well. She did that mostly to help us pay for tuition, because they gave a discount for it if she played for them. And yeah, it was pretty normal. I mean, I enjoyed it. I was
Yeah.
also taking piano from my grandmother at the
Okay.
time.
Yep.
And, I didn't have any big aspirations about going into music until I was about 9 or 10. And there was a documentary that was put out by PBS. They may still have it. I haven't watched PBS forever, but they had an ongoing series called Great Performances.
Oh.
And yeah, and they had this one documentary that was part of that series that was called The Art of the Violin.
Okay.
And it was all about the great violinists of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And it was the first time, so I think I was in like book 4, Suzuki book 4 at this time. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of people like Heifetz or Chrysler or
Mm,
Oistrakh or
mm.
Menuhin. I knew who Isaac Stern was because my older brother's name is Isaac, and so, here's another violinist with the name Isaac. So I knew who Isaac Stern was, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I so once I saw that, I had no real clue as to what the violin was capable of until I saw that documentary, and I just became obsessed after that. And I started researching. There was my local library had this big giant book about violinists from that time period, and I
Yeah.
probably rented it out and read through the whole thing several times, at
Oh,
least
I
three or
love
four
that.
times.
Yeah.
And then I became obsessed. So the whole documentary actually starts with the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto being performed by. So they'll have one video of one violinist playing it, and then they'll cut to another violinist, and so it's a really amazing montage. And so for a while, I was very obsessed with the Mendelssohn Concerto. And
It's a good concerto.
sorry.
It's a good concerto, so of
It's
course, yeah.
at the very least. At the very
Yeah.
least, it's a good concerto. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was really obsessed with being able to play that, and I'd already started working much harder on Suzuki stuff. So between the ages of 9 and 12, I ended up going from book 4 to book 7, I think, and
Mhm.
then I um, I told I told my teacher I really wanted to play the Mendelssohn, and of course she said no. And I
Because you're in
started.
book 7, is that right? At this time,
Yeah,
you're
I
in
was
book
in book
7?
7. Yeah, and so I started. So I was about 12 at this time, and so I started
Yeah.
really practicing. I started just learning it by ear. I learned the opening part by ear,
Wow.
and I came back to my lessons once, and I was like, "Hey, check this out." And so I played it, and my teacher was like, "You actually figured out the correct fingering." And so he said, "Here, you can borrow this for a week," and he gave me his copy of the Mendelssohn Concerto. And I think he thought he was going to discourage me.
Right, right.
after I looked at it, but I just basically tried to practice it all week, did my best. And then when I got back, he didn't say anything. He just took the music back and just assumed that was that. So I was depressed about that. So my mother took me to the local music store, found whatever copy they had, which was the international edition, and bought that for me. And I just kept practicing it. And for weeks, I was just practicing it. And finally, my mom called my teacher and was like, "Hey, maybe you should let him do this." And he was she convinced him to let me try it. And so through sheer will, I actually ended up learning it way earlier than I should have.
Dang.
A year later, I actually won a local competition playing it. I got to play it with orchestra. It's a terrible performance because I was the most nervous I've probably ever been in my entire life, but I did do that. And that was what really jump started me towards actually doing serious violin and serious repertoire.
Mm.
So,
Very cool. Oh my goodness. I feel like you came out of the gates like, this is what I want to do. Is that kind of how you feel? Or was it, because gosh, if you're like 9 or 10 and you've decided like medicine is what you want to play, I don't remember that for me. Like I was very much like, I don't really like violin, but I love that you had like such a passion for it from such a young age. That's actually very, very impressive. Dang.
I feel it's not super. I mean, I have met, like, for instance, interestingly enough, one of my old teachers, is a brilliant violinist. He won Young Concert Artists when he was finishing his master's at Juilliard. He didn't start playing violin until he was 10.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm not that's not usual. Usually people do get into it, like actually seriously get into it pretty young. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean people. It's not everyone. Some people find it, within start a little bit later and find it within a very short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually something I do want to touch on that a little bit later as well. Like
Hmm.
if you're starting a little bit older. For now, I would actually say like what made you, besides like obviously you had a passion for it, but like what made you stick with the violin? And then what advice would you give to somebody starting out?
Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
What made you stick with the violin? Like was there, like
Well,
you said you also played piano and
well, sticking with the violin was obviously because I really had a developed because of that documentary. I developed a
yeah,
passion for it, and then I started making some very quick progress. And when you start making a lot of progress in something, it's more fun.
yeah,
That's obviously why I stuck with violin. I ended up not sticking with piano, much to my grandmother's chagrin, just because it didn't have time.
yeah,
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 just I realized I had to focus on one of them, and it
yeah.
was going to be violin. So, I mean, it was useful, by the way. Uh, if anyone could take this advice, if you can study at least a few years of piano, it's worth it.
Yeah.
It does give you a very good visual sense of music.
Yeah.
And also, of course, if you end up going to music school, they kind of want you to have, for a theory class, they want you to be able to play piano at least a little bit. And
Yes.
then, uh, yeah, it also, piano lessons, at least with my grandmother, pianists tend to be a little bit better, piano teachers tend to be a little bit better at music theory, or at least giving music theory to their students, right? It just kind of comes with the territory.
Right.
I try to do that as much as possible with some of my students, try to make sure they understand what their key signatures and everything are. But I mean, I remember it'd be kind of surprising when I remember getting to music school, and there were people that didn't, like, have all of the key signatures memorized. So
Dang. Dang. Okay, wait. So
yeah.
now that we're talking about music school, because I looked up you went to Cleveland International or into
No, Cleveland Institute of Music.
Cleveland is that's what I meant. I knew
Yeah.
what I was saying. Yeah, which is amazing. So obviously, like tell us about the audition process and like getting into that because I've had a few people ask me like auditioning for music schools or even just college in general. So like
Hmm.
could you kind of tell us like the audition process, like how was that? Maybe even what you've played. I've had a few people ask me like, what songs to play or pieces to play. Can you
Hmm.
kind of give us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually just talking to a potential student about preparing for music school the other day. Um, every school has some slightly different requirements for repertoire. So
Mhm.
obviously, so if you want to audition for a school, first off, you need to just the basic rundown. You need to have a good idea of what schools you want to go to,
Mhm.
um, at least a year before you start applying, not before the audition. That's too late. Before you start applying, and hopefully you should start thinking about this. That's why if you think about this a little earlier, um, like in your halfway through high school or something, you want to start forming what you want to do at school because you need to be familiar with the schools. You need to be familiar who's teaching there, right? And just a moment. Hey, you, go over there. Hey, go lie down. Sorry, my dog is deciding right now. She was sleeping the entire time up to this point, and now she has decided she needs my attention. So
Oh no.
anyway, yeah, sorry.
It's all
Anyway,
good.
so sorry, what?
It's I said it's all good.
Yeah.
I live on a
Anyway,
farm, so we have so many animals all the time.
oh, how fun! How
Oh
fun!
yes.
I have an aunt that has a farm, so I'm very familiar with that. Anyway, so anyway, yeah, so you just need to have all of that figured out before you start applying, right? Because you need to know what teacher you want to study with. If you have the chance to even take trial lessons with any of these teachers,
Right.
that's definitely something you should do. And now that a lot of people are doing online lessons, that's probably a lot easier to do now. So I thankfully had exposure to a lot of these teachers because I used to go to a lot of summer music programs like the Heifetz Institute and Meadowmount, right? So I spent quite a few summers there when I was a teenager. So I had quite a bit of experience with a lot of these teachers, or at least knew of them, right?
Yeah.
And I could maybe some of them I heard about, so I thought, okay, I want to maybe check out this person, or you could ask some other teachers that you met about other teachers, and they would give you their opinion on them, and so you kind of collect sort of a database of teachers that you might
Mhm.
want to study with. And then the other thing is you have to know, of course, you should know this at least a year before your audition. Sorry, before you apply, what is the required repertoire for auditions. Now, one thing you can always count on is that you're going to have to play the first movement of a major concerto and Bach, likely two movements of solo Bach. Right?
Mhm.
That is the same on just about every single audition, and it is very likely the only thing they will actually hear, even if they have other things on the list.
Mhm.
Right? In my experience, I think there was one audition I took where they heard like one of the tertiary things they asked for. Right? Every other audition, it was your first movement of concerto and then solo Bach.
Yeah.
So if you know that much, then even before you figure out what schools you're going to go to and you figure out, okay, well, Juilliard is asking for a piece written after 1955 or something like that. Before you even know things like that, or start having to worry about what am I going to play for something like that,
Mhm.
okay, I can play the first movement of a major concerto, and I can play and I can learn two movements of solo Bach. And like I said, those very well might be, chances are, the only things they'll actually listen to. And so you
Mhm.
should have over a year to prepare for those. And you should give yourself at least a year to really be prepared for those, especially if it's your first time auditioning.
Yep. Love that. Random question. Do these have to be memorized?
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100, oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
My Cleveland audition was really interesting because that was the only audition and it actually kind of threw me for a loop halfway through. They actually heard me play the entire. So I played the Saint-Saëns, third violin concerto, the first movement.
Mhm.
Um, they heard me play the entire movement. It's a 15-minute audition, by the way. So usually you play like the first page or the first two
Right.
pages, and they're like, "Thank you," and then they're like, "Please play some Bach, please play this," and then that's it. For my first audition, for my audition at Cleveland, it was not my first audition, but for my audition at Cleveland, I I got about to the point where they typically stop you, and I was like, okay, they're gonna stop me soon, and they didn't stop. I was like, all right, so I kept going, and about when I got three-quarters of the way through the whole piece, I was like, oh, they're gonna make me play the entire first movement, which was like 8 or 9 minutes.
Dang.
without piano. So thankfully, by that point, I obviously prepared enough. But by that point, I was, mentally, I had to make a switch because you're mentally ready for them to stop you. And then
Yeah.
about halfway or 2/3 of the way through, I was like, oh, I'm gonna actually play through the entire thing. So I did play through the entire thing. It went pretty well, obviously. And then they're like, okay, thank you very much. Could you play, your solo box? I was playing the A minor sonata, the first two movements. And that was an interesting one because I played through the first movement. Again, they heard the entire thing. And then I stopped because the movement was over. And then they were like, weren't you going to play the fugue? And I was like, okay, yeah, I didn't realize, because there was more on the list. I forgot what else was on the list for Cleveland, but there was more on the list than those three things. But they were actually expecting me to just like stop once I got done with the first one, just immediately go to the second movement, the fugue. And I was kind of surprised. So I played through like, I don't know, a page of the fugue or something, and then the 15 minutes were up, and then that's when they actually stopped me. Yeah,
Wow.
so that was my Cleveland audition, which was a little bit different than
Dang.
some of the others.
Yeah. So you actually played through the entire concerto, and then
Oh well, the entire first movement, yeah.
right. Wow. Um. Okay. So with all that, like obviously, we need all the details on your practice routine. So
Okay.
give us like even like right now, like what do you do now versus maybe what you were doing in college? I don't know if you want to
Oh,
like kind of
I
that.
was. I wish I had my current practice routine when I was in college. I was,
Same.
unfortunately, part of the reason why a lot of my videos take the shape they do is because I'm really, even just for the sake of my own teaching, um, I'm really want to be as systematic as possible,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And I was very much a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy for especially going through high school and certainly into college. And so I actually kind of ran, and that worked really well for me until about halfway through my freshman year, and then I realized I was needed to figure out something. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, none of the teachers, I really have a lot of respect for a lot of people I studied with, but unfortunately, a lot of the teachers that I did work with um, weren't systematic at all.
Mm,
And actually, the person that was I learned the most from was very systematic. Actually, I only studied with for 3 weeks, and that was Grigory Kalinowski, and I worked with him at Heifetz, which was after my freshman year, which is actually the second time I went to Heifetz. But I worked with him. He used to work with Zuckerman, and he was like one of Zuckerman's teaching assistants. And then there was another teacher who was also one of Zuckerman's teaching assistants named Patinka Kopek. And Kalinowski's at Indiana University right now. Um, so anyway, I I worked with him for 3 weeks and also with Fatika Kopek for 3 weeks, and they completely gave me well, at least as much as complete as you can do in 6 weeks. They gave me a very systematic approach to some technique basics,
mm,
right? And from then on, I was able to I've spent the last 10 or so years just trying to extrapolate that really
yeah.
into having something more of a system. And I create more and more rigid systems or add to the system, make it more rigid
Mm,
every year. And so a lot of my practice is really geared towards teaching, right? I'm not performing anything, right? I'm mostly just trying to figure out, okay, how do I what is the best way to approach this technique? How do I teach this technique?
right.
And use a lot of myself as a guinea pig for how to think about that. So my current practice routine, this is the thing that I found, and I kind of went over this a little bit in a recent video, but my current practice technique, routine is obviously I always start with scales no matter what. I start with scales.
Yep.
The past couple weeks I've barely been able to practice because we thought we might look into buying a house. Turns out we're not going to because the Utah market's crazy, but
Oh,
we decided to look into it. So that took up a lot of time. But anyway, but
real life. It's okay.
yeah, even during that time, I would still at least play a little bit of scales every
Mhm.
day,
Yep.
right? Even if it's just 10 minutes, I would play to the scale every day. But ideally, I try to play through at least one key of the flesh system,
Yep.
right? And that actually took some working up into, and I don't advise anyone just jump right into the flesh system. There's a lot of like, unless you feel very comfortable doing, octave arpeggios, right?
Do you do
Uh,
all like the entire like
I try to. Some days I've actually walked it back a little bit. For a bit
okay,
there, for several weeks there, I was doing the entire thing, just one key every day, including the bowings and
right.
stuff like that, right?
Dang.
And I would even like write down, because my goal is to see if I can have the entire system eventually, and this would be a couple of years of a project, but have the entire system memorized. Right, I want a really deep understanding of the fletch scale system. So I
Yeah.
have my good old whiteboard over there. That's got all of the. I've written all of the bowing patterns onto the various keys. Right.
Okay.
Eventually, the goal is to see if I can mix and match them or whatever, just to have that much of a mastery over the system.
Right.
But yeah, I was playing through everything, including like fingered octave arpeggios and stuff like that. But I kind of actually took a step back, which is something I do quite a bit. I'll really push something for a bit, and then I realize, I want to actually take a deeper look at this. So I'll actually take a little bit of a step back. So I have been doing all of the double stops, but for a few of them, I've just been sticking with like just the scale instead of like doing chromatics or broken thirds or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Because I just really want to focus on, okay, what do I need to focus on with my hand when I'm doing octaves or things like that.
Yeah.
And then of course it gives me a little more time to work on other things. So I will go back to doing the whole thing at some point. Maybe in a few weeks I'll go back to it. But right now I'm taking a little bit of a step back. But that's what starts every day. And then after that, it's either technique day for my left hand or technique day for my bow arm, right? So for my left hand, my typical routine is I start with Shadik,
Is
and
that how you say that?
that is apparently how I have 3 students in Germany, and that is apparently how you say it.
Wait, say it again. Shadi?
Shadik.
Shadi. Okay. I'm saying it very wrong.
Yeah, no, I called it
Don't touch
Shradiak.
me.
No, I called it Shradiak my entire life. So
I just called it Shradik. My teacher was
that
Russian,
is
and that's
just
how
as
he.
wrong. That's actually a little closer, I think, than
I don't know.
than to the actual pronunciation.
I was
Yeah,
just
no.
copying my teacher, and he was Russian, and that's how he said it. So I was like, I don't know.
Well, that is like I said, that's probably his accent. Like that's actually closer than what I used to say, which was Shradiak, but Shradik, Shradik. Yeah, that's
Okay.
closer.
Good to know.
Anyway, yeah, I start out with that, and again, it's a similar thing. I did
Yep.
Shradiak a long time ago, and I decided to kind of take a look back on it, really refine some things in my left hand,
Yeah.
and so I've gone through it in many many different ways. I usually always play through the first couple pages with a metronome, and I'm really just focusing on just the not just the form of the hand, but also articulation, particularly.
Yeah.
And then I've also started doing the third page. I was trying to do a lot more of it, but one I think was just too much to do at once. So I'm just again slowly adding things in. And then after that, I have my big book of subject, which is right here.
Love subject.
Most important technique book in existence. And I go through. He's got a lot of exercises similar to the Shredik exercises for various positions
Yeah.
2 through 7, and I just take a line out of each one, and I just with the metronome, very much slower than I do Shadi, and I just play through each one. Not
Mhm.
each one. I take one line and I play through it, and then I may stick on one line for a week and then move on to another line, and then sometimes I'll review other lines. That one I'm not particularly as systematic about,
Yeah.
but I go through all
Which
of those, and then he's also got the shifting exercises in there, which I'm
okay.
almost finished going through all of those. Um, but right now there's a couple left, which is the shifts from first to seventh position and so on, and then first to eighth.
Yeah. So
And
did,
then
did you say this book that you have is all of subjects
no,
combined?
no, no, it's that you couldn't fit that in a single book.
Yeah.
No.
So
No, this is just what's called the essential subject.
okay.
So this was introduced to me by my teacher at the last school I went to, which was University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. My teacher there, David Halen, I was discussing some issues I was having with some left hand technique stuff, and he happened to have this on his shelf. Not this particular copy, but he had this book, and he gave it to me. And so I just started messing. That really was what introduced me to subject because I never had a teacher work with me on subject before. So
Yeah.
I really started just messing around with it, and then I leave it alone for a bit, and then I come back to it. And now I feel like I've really, because I systematized it, I found a way to really understand how to practice it.
Yeah.
But yeah, after shifting, I go to double stops. He's got a bunch of these different exercises and double stops. And again, I just pick out a couple exercises a day,
Right. Right.
right? And again, this is only for left hand days, so it's every other day, really. But, and then I go through that. I was going through his trill exercises, which are not in this book, but are very useful and also very boring. That's Opus 7,
Okay.
right?
I don't think I've
Um,
trill exercises. Or maybe
Sorry?
some of them. I don't think I've done his trill exercises or
Almost no one. People don't do trill exercises much anymore. If
no.
you read, I like to read old stuff about like old pedagogy, and if you read like the experiences of Heifetz studying with, we're not really actually studying with R, but R's assistant that took him on before he went to R, or even Michael Rabin studying with Galamian, there's actually quite a bit of a mention of trill exercises,
Mm.
and that's not something I see anyone doing anymore. And I actually think it's incredibly useful for developing, obviously, the trill, but also just the left hand.
Yeah.
So it's very boring, though, and that might be the reason nobody wants to do them. So,
For a second,
so
I'm okay.
yeah, no, like they're mind numbing. They are
Yeah.
mind numbing. But
Yeah.
I did power through most of that book, and I might go back to it eventually again. It was very useful. It was very useful. Yeah, and then there's a few others. There's some really complicated double stop exercises that I'll like pick whatever key I'm on with scales. I'll just pick the one that's in that key and maybe like
Okay.
just play through it slowly. Then I do
Yeah.
some left hand pizzicato, and that's my left hand technique routine. And whether or not I get to practice anything else that day will depend
Yeah.
on how things go that day. Then for my bow arm, Septic Opus 2, which part of it is in this book. The first book, which is where I recommend everyone start, is not in the big Septic book. You actually have to get it. Actually, it might be behind this piece of music that I have on this music stand, so I'll pull it out and knock my phone over. But yeah, Septic Opus 2 is the first book. I take just about every student through that, or at
Mm.
least through the first part of that. It's just the most basic, like bow motion exercises. Uh, but it's real. The basics of violin playing are the most difficult in many ways to
Oh yeah.
get because you have to create consistency. And not only consistency, you have to create consistency in the correct motions.
Yeah.
And that is much easier said than done. So a lot of the most basic things, even with some students I have that are fairly advanced, a lot of the most basic things have to be revisited again and again and again. So Subject Opus 2, um, I'm mostly in the latter part of that book where
Hmm.
it goes into more. He basically, the way it works is he gives a very simple theme, and then he has hundreds of variations showing different bowing and rhythm patterns,
Hmm.
right? That you just superimpose onto the theme. Um, and each one, and he'll even have headlines. Okay, this is for spiccato. This is for staccato. This is for marcato. This is for um, you know, using awkward bowings or whatever. And so I do a line of that each day. Then going back to the big subject book, I started doing, and again, this is mostly just so I'm familiar with it. He's got a bunch of different exercises for string crossings. That wasn't something I felt like I was particularly struggling with. I just wanted to be familiar with the exercises. So I play
Yeah.
through a line of the various string crossing exercises every day in the three iterations: the two string crossings, three string crossings, and four string crossings.
Wow.
And then I've also been looking at Schick's Opus 3, which most people might know as the 40 Variations, which is actually on the stand right now. And I just pick right now. I'm just very slowly kind of working my way through that, just playing a lot of these over and over again, just
Hmm.
to kind of because if you're not familiar with that, that's a little bit more interesting than a lot of the other subject stuff. Again, it's another theme and variations, but it's not just a theme and then you superimpose a rhythm on top of it. It's actually a lot more creative than that. And yeah, so I work through that, and that's my bow arm routine. And I switch off every other day. I used to try to do all that in one day, and I had no time to do anything else. Sometimes I still barely have time to practice everything, but and then I just sometimes will pick different bits of repertoire out and just kind of try to apply things that I've been working on in technique to repertoire, especially maybe it's repertoire that some of my students are studying, and just gives me a chance to think about that. So
Yeah.
that's basically where my how my daily practice typically looks.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love the systems you've created around it, and like even just like the every other day switching off between left hand and right hand. Like that's actually very I've not heard that before. That's actually really cool. I love that. I feel like usually I try and just do everything all in one day, and that's always a lot. But
if
like
I
you're
was
not
back at
doing that.
school, I would. That's the thing. Is like if I was back at school, I would definitely do all this in one day, and I would do it every day. And
Yeah.
that's the advantage of one being single and two being in school. So Um, but that's not how life is anymore. So
Right.
I wish, again, that's why I said I wish I knew about this way of practicing when I
Yeah.
was in school. I would have made things a lot less frustrating. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I had to learn it the hard way, so my students can learn it the easy way.
So how long does this all generally take you in a day?
Not super long. It depends. Like getting through all the scales usually takes, depending on how much I decide to do with it, might take 45 minutes to an hour
Hmm.
at most.
Just
Sometimes it
now
takes less.
scale. That's
Just
it.
to ski, yeah, if you're doing everything in the flesh book, it can take that long.
Right.
It depends, right? And then when it comes to whether it's bowing or shift, bowing or left hand, if I was completely uninterrupted, it might take another hour at most. Right. So the technique stuff, once you get a flow to it,
Yeah.
it doesn't always take that long.
Right.
Really, it maybe be 2 hours at most. Um, but probably an hour to an hour and a half is probably usually what it takes to get through all of this. Again, this is assuming we're splitting the left hand and right hand days.
Right, right. So when you were in college, you were obviously practicing, and even like before college, like leading up to it to like
Mhm.
prepare for auditions and everything like that, you were obviously practicing a ton more. Is that right?
Mhm.
Or what would you say?
Yeah, no, yeah, no. I've always been a big practicer. I actually practice a lot less now than I used to.
Yeah.
No, when I was the year before I was preparing for auditions, I was practicing probably average of 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And, that was largely because there's so much repertoire.
Yeah.
When I first got to school and I kind of ran into that roadblock, I actually was not practicing as much as I probably should have been, partially because, it was, just the allure of being far away from home and there's
You're
too
experiencing.
many, yeah, just too many things to too much freedom in some respects. So it's like, hey, I actually can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning. Why
Right.
not do that?
Right.
So
So
which
fun.
sounds like a nightmare to me now. But yeah, no, that was a lot of my freshman year. But also a lot of it was, when I was having an audition and things were a little bit different, like I kind of ran into a wall with I didn't really understand. Like I used the way I practiced before my auditions for my undergrad, my approach was just kind of throw notes at the violin until they stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that worked until it didn't.
Yeah.
And
That's
when
so
it didn't, I was kind of just like for a loss for a little bit, like how am I actually supposed to practice?
yeah.
So
I think that's a lot of that's a question that a lot of people have is like, how am I supposed to actually practice? So that's why
yeah.
I love like your systems that you've like placed around it. That's very, I love that. what about any advice for students struggling to create their own practice routines and be consistent with those? What would you have any advice? Thinking maybe like kind of maybe thinking like more beginner students, but then also like more intermediate advanced students. What would you say?
I mean, especially when it comes to learning technique, I would say that the number one important thing is you. It needs to be very gradual,
Hmm.
right? So, and it has to be consistent.
Yeah.
So you're better off practicing, and I know this has been said before, but it's a lot of people ignore it anyway. So it's worth saying again. You're better off practicing, especially if you're just beginning, right? You're better off trying to practice like 10 minutes a day every day with, just systematically going through a list of things that you check up on, let's say you're just a beginner. So you're just practicing. I'm going to practice my posture. I'm going to practice finding my, how to the violin hold and the bow hold and maybe some basic bowing motion. And I'm really going to watch to make sure, to the best of my ability as a beginner, that I'm doing everything as correctly as possible. The if you did that for 10, 15 minutes a day, you would be better, and just really don't get too intense with it and
Hmm.
just really focus on the consistency. You're going to be a lot better off than trying to really master it all at once.
Yeah.
And that seems obvious when you say it, but that's not the way a lot of people go about it. They try to get everything done at once, and then they get very frustrated.
Yeah. It's like because I feel like everyone's like excited to actually play more, and it's
Hmm.
actually much better to just go slowly, get set up properly, make sure you have the correct technique, and then move on rather than trying to do all the things at the same
Yeah,
time, huh?
learning. I saw this. This was in a video entirely unrelated to violin, but
I
um,
love those.
yeah, no, it was actually about Olympic weightlifting, but uh, it the title of the video was "Learning as slow as possible is learning as fast as possible,"
Mm.
and the whole point, because if you've never tried, I've never actually like, if you never tried to do any type of Olympic weightlifting, um, there's a lot of technique involved,
Yeah.
right? And so the guy whose his channel was talking about is like people that try to lift very heavy right off the bat end up, maybe they actually do for a while, seem to be making a lot of progress right at first, but then they hit a wall that forces them, because they didn't learn proper technique, forces them to go back and lift less.
Yeah.
So you said, instead you took the approach that you're just going to, as slowly as it takes,
Yeah.
learn how to do things properly. You'll actually, in the long run, make a lot faster progress
Yeah.
than somebody who just rushes into it. And I think there's a lot that's applicable within that to violin as well. So.
Yeah. That's so true. Wow. Yeah, love that. Okay, so I have to I want to make sure we get to some questions, but I really want to ask you about vibrato because this
Mhm.
month I'm doing like a whole vibrato series on my channel, so everything is slightly geared towards vibrato. So I have to ask you, do you have any great tips for learning vibrato or advice like for people that are like I said, I think a lot of my subscribers are probably either trying to learn by themselves or they're learning online or maybe in school orchestra. So they don't have a lot of one-on-one
Mhm.
teachers, but what would you say like is your best tips or advice for people that are learning vibrato?
I mean, and I've seen your videos on vibrato, so I know you have a step by step system,
No, I would
right?
love to hear. I would love to hear exactly like whatever you think. Like, I will not be offended. I think it's
Oh
great
no,
to
of
have
course not. No,
different.
no, I wasn't gonna critique anything you had to say. I'm just saying, when it comes to like the very like learning vibrato for because there's, to me, there's a difference between learning vibrato for the first time and
Yeah.
um, really refining your vibrato, right?
Yes.
So
Hmm.
learning for most students, if you have a good step by step approach, learning the basics of vibrato is not that difficult.
Hmm.
The problem usually comes when a student tried to learn it on their own and got some really bad habits. That's usually where I run into problems
Yeah.
with students, where it takes a little bit longer. But generally, when it comes to learning vibrato, I mean, really, it comes down to two main things. You have to have a sense of rhythm, whether you're using your arm or your wrist. You have to have a good sense of rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
right? A very good sense of rhythm, and you have to develop the knocking motion, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I always have students do, and do this against the wall, just do it against my hand, right?
Mm.
If you can't do this in a clear rhythm, you can't do vibrato.
Interesting.
So, and you may think anyone can do it. No, they can't,
Hmm.
right? I mean, they can maybe after a while, but you'd be shocked at how many people can't knock in rhythm, right?
Mm.
So first things first is make sure you have a good sense of rhythm and that you are able to have a good knocking sense of rhythm. The other thing is that in the vibrato motion, whether again using the wrist or the arm, is you have to have you have to focus on one aspect of the motion, back or forth, doesn't matter, but you can only do one.
Mm.
Another thing that gets the students into trouble with vibrato is they try to get both in there instead of having one motion and the other motion be a reaction to it,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if because yeah, I can go like this and maybe keep a uh, fairly rhythmic motion, but when you actually try to go fast, you actually try to get the actual vibrato motion in. You can't do that. One, if you actually succeed, like just what I was doing here, again, this is very tense. It's a very
Yeah.
tense motion.
Yep.
Most people can't do that. They'll just get stuck in one part of the motion, and you'll hear that in the vibrato. So again, back to the theme of not going faster than you need to, right? Make sure
Mm-hmm.
you can do this. And one of the ways, I have a whole video where I go over this, but one of the ways in which I have people practice this is just there's two ways where you can, besides just knocking on the wall or whatever. There's two ways you can knock against the violin, right? So you can actually get some experience with the violin itself. So one way is I just have the thumb here, make a little L right there.
Mm-hmm.
Start with the hand up against the violin, and make sure I always start with arm vibrato. Make sure that this entire thing moves together, right?
Yeah.
And then the thumb stays stationary because the thumb has to be the arbiter of the vibrato motion. So you just get used to this motion here. If you
Mm.
get used to that motion and you combine that with the rhythmic knocking that you've hopefully already practiced, and you can slowly get it faster and faster. Again, I'm focusing on the upward motion here and kind of bouncing off the violin.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you can do this, then it's not much to actually just start doing a basic vibrato.
Yeah.
Right? The other thing that screws people up is squeezing. Right? Let's say somebody can do this, and I've seen this before. Somebody can do this motion, okay? But when they come to do a vibrato, it gets stuck. Okay, well, what's the problem? Well, it's usually because they are gripping the string way too hard,
Yeah.
right? And then the finger can't move,
Right.
right? Because they think that, well, I don't want the hand to slide around, so I'm going to have to squeeze the string very
Mm-hmm.
hard. That's absolutely incorrect, right? Um, the issue is the fingertip has to roll, right? So some people will do that more naturally, right? I'm sure people have seen, that
Noodle
with
bagel.
violinists. Sorry.
Noodle bagel.
Oh yes, yes. I thought it was yeah. I remember. I remember that video you did. I forgot. I remember there was a donut involved, but I can't remember.
Donut spaghetti noodle
Donut
bagel.
spaghetti. Okay, donut spaghetti noodle bagel. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I kept thinking it was pizza, but I was like, how is that? Okay. Yes.
No. No. No.
Anyway. Yeah. Anyway. So then, if that's a problem, then I just work with them on being able to allow that finger, that joint here to be flexible,
Yeah.
and then for the finger to roll. And then, after that, again, and when you first start doing vibrato, also don't try to do a wide vibrato,
Yeah.
right? First off, usually it doesn't sound very good, even if you can do it. And secondly, this is fine
Yeah.
for a beginning vibrato. This is fine, right?
Yep.
And this is very relaxed. My finger is flexible. So those would be my tips, if you want to call them, for just doing basic vibrato.
Yeah.
Once you get the hang of that, you're going to do that for a year or so. or longer, however long the teacher wants. Then maybe it's time to start getting into some more refined vibrato, maybe learning wrist vibrato. Um, I knew a guy that kind of did a similar thing with wrist vibrato with the knocking. Um, for me, wrist vibrato is the one that I probably because I learned it when I was doing my master's degree. I did the metronome method, the
Mhm.
hardcore, just like go back and forth with the metronome, and
Yeah.
it took like a year,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Because
then even ever since then, I've been really trying to refine it even
yeah.
more. But it was by that point it was very much worth it to really do all of that because it forced me to have some real control
Yeah.
over my vibrato that actually went into my own vibrato as well. So
Yeah. How long would you say, because I feel like this is something else that I think a lot of students don't understand. How long would you say that it takes to learn vibrato generally?
it
I know
depends.
we're still we're still learning vibrato, but what would you say?
It depends. It really depends. I've had some students. Here's what I will say: the adult students are the ones that I've had the most difficult time with
Yeah.
learning vibrato. Um, and some of that wasn't just the motion itself; it was coordinating it with their bow. That's actually what I've noticed to be sometimes the most
Mhm.
difficult thing. That's something that's really difficult to get over because it's almost a psychological issue where they're each hand wants to kind of do what the other one is doing, and that's really difficult to break.
Yeah.
So I had this one student that I was working with vibrato on for like just we were just kind of chipping away at it as best we could for like over a year. And she even had like she was friends with this concert violinist who used to study with Nathan Milstein. And she was trying to help her with vibrato, and we were both like, so the two of us were trying to help this
Yeah.
poor lady with vibrato, and yeah, I don't think she ever quite got it.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the worst case. That was the worst case. She still plays. She'll occasionally send me stuff, so she's still enjoying it, so that's good. But yeah, she had a really tough time with it.
Yeah.
Um, and then some other ones, like especially like some of my younger students. Once I just go through the basic steps with them, after a few months, they've got a pretty good sense of it,
Yeah.
and then they can start,
A
after
few
a few teachers.
months.
Yeah, yeah, typically I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first learned vibrato, I remember I had like an egg shaker type thing, and that's what I think my old teacher used,
That's what I did
and
too.
that
Yeah.
happened so long ago. I barely remember the process, but it happened. I remember doing the thing here. I don't remember how this turned into vibrato, but it did.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was. Yeah, that was really, really. That was still. I was still single digits, I think, when we were
Yeah.
doing it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. Same. Um, okay, I want to really quickly ask a few last questions because then I also, like I said, there's three questions, but I think this would be really helpful for some people. Um, what is your opinion on learning the violin solely online or through online courses versus private lessons or obviously in person, like online?
Okay. We're talking when we say online, we mean like
So
a pre-recorded video tutorial type thing.
well, like, so if they're learning like solely online through like YouTube or like an online course versus like a one-on-one lesson, whether it's online or in person,
Okay.
but like
Yeah.
a one-on-one with an
Um.
actual teacher.
My opinion is it's possible to a certain degree, but you have to be very conscientious and to really do okay with it.
Hmm.
And there's probably a pretty low ceiling for how far you can go.
Yeah.
So I've actually had about three students. They weren't long time students, actually just really people that popped in that were doing that and just wanted to get some extra help.
Right.
Um, that actually seem to be doing pretty well with the basics
Hmm.
just from online courses,
Right.
right?
Right.
Two of them were French. I don't know if it has anything to do with it. It was kind of an odd coincidence. Like of all the people that have actually done really well just like without a teacher, like two of them were French. I
Yeah.
don't know what that was about, but yeah, I've seen. I've only seen that like 3 times.
Okay.
So, yes, it's possible. They were, again, just doing, like, bare like, Suzuki Book 1, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but
Right.
their setup, their bow hold, their, beginner intonation, their bow motion, like, stuff it was actually all quite good.
Mm,
So, if you're really paying attention, and you have a good sense, like, of muscular control,
right.
then you can get started that way.
Yeah.
I do think you'll probably hit a wall of some kind at some point.
Yeah.
Um, so that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. This is something else I really wanted to make sure I asked you because I have a few people that I know they've asked me. What's your biggest piece of advice for someone picking up the violin in their 40s or later? Is it ever really too late to learn?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course not. No, no. I mean, you know, have reasonable expectations. I mean, have big goals, as big goals as you want, but reasonable expectations,
Yeah.
right? Again, it's it. The thing is like somebody starts when they're 6, right? And they play for 10 years and then they maybe start to sound pretty good. That's a really long time, but it doesn't feel as bad, as much when you're
Right.
6, right?
Right.
And that's somebody who had a lot more time to dedicate to it. If you're 40, you've got a full life, you've got a family or something, you can probably make maybe not the same level of progress, but you can make a lot of progress. And let's say you
Mhm.
keep it up for 10 years. Well, again, that's a long period of time, but that's the amount of time you might expect, and you probably have a lot less time to actually focus on it.
Right.
And this, so you just have to have a very long time horizon for your goals,
Yeah.
and just understand that that's the process is going to be. The process was always going to be slow, even if you started when you were really young, and
Yeah.
you're going to really be aware of that when you're older.
Yeah.
So so long as you're aware of that, then go for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Okay, so I want to get to a few questions that I got on my post.
Hmm.
Um, okay. What's the ideal number of times a week and hours a day for a beginner to practice? I know we kind of went over this.
I
Um,
think, yeah. I mean, it depends on the person, but um, like I said before, if we're talking about like literally the first time you've touched the instrument, um, most of the stuff you'll be learning right off the bat is stuff that you really only need to be practicing for 10 to 15 minutes a day, but every day.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Love that. What do you recommend for someone who is always tense when playing the violin? I find it hard to do vibrato and have a stable bow strokes, even as an intermediate player.
That is not a question that has one answer. So I'll do my best to kind of give some general ideas, but
Yeah,
again, that's when I work with someone. A lot of violin teaching is kind of similar to physical therapy because you're trying to get people to do things with their muscles they're not used to, and sometimes getting them to not do things with their muscles that they are used to.
yeah,
So one thing I do want to preface with this is that you very not always, most of the time I've been able to help people with tension, but it is entirely possible that the tension issues you might be having can have need outside professional help.
yeah,
I just want to preface that not all the time,
yeah.
but for example, my wife, who actually used to teach a little bit, she's had some because she had really bad violin teachers when she was younger, and
Oh,
so she's had got tons of tension problems in her shoulders and stuff.
mm,
Yeah, so she started for completely different reasons. Had to start going to a chiropractor, and the other day she said like for the first time in her life she felt like she was able to play without much pain. And I've been trying to work with her on things like tension, releasing tension for the past couple of years, and like
Mm,
nothing had worked or barely worked. Like it had
yeah.
gotten a little better, but so there are things like if you've been holding tension for a long time, then there's only so much changing your technique can do. So that's just I just want to throw that out there. Not always, but just that's something to consider if you're having problems with tension. The other thing is I would say, like I said, it depends on the person, but you want to be very comfortable with natural body motions.
Mm,
So, for instance, one of the things that I've been working with a lot of students on for the past couple of weeks, one of the things that I've kind of refined how I've been teaching is to spark the bow stroke or initiate the bow stroke from a sensation of swinging the arm, right? So if we start with kind of a dead hang in our arm, like that's one of the first things. Is like, can you get a dead hang in your
hmm
arm, right? And it's surprising some people struggle with this, and actually get a true like just swing with it, right? So I'll have the students go through this, and then the next thing I like to have them do is we'll just start at the tip. And the whole point is you're not supposed to do good bow technique, right? You're just supposed to see if you can swing the arm like this, the tip, which a lot of people have trouble doing. They
mm,
want to start poking and things like that. But no, just like hold everything like this. Like don't even just hold everything properly. Just if you can get a sense of that, then actually for a few more steps, you can actually get the sense of using a swing to get all over the frog. And same thing back down. And then we slowly refine that into a proper bow stroke. But the start, the impetus of the bow stroke comes from this natural, though tempered, swinging motion. And if you start working with people on things like that, not only does it improve their technique, not only does it improve their sound, but it also makes things a lot easier to. It also reduces a lot of tension in playing. So, like I said,
interesting.
I can't tell someone how they personally can get rid of tension, but a lot of things go back to whether or not you are having a natural your violin technique is coming from natural motions, right,
Mm,
and not just pure muscular force.
yeah, yeah,
So
that's so true. Love that. Awesome. Okay, sorry. Two more questions. I'm
no,
trying
no
to keep
problem,
straight.
no problem.
Okay, so I think this is a I think she used to be a professional, I believe. What are some good agility practices for adults who aren't taking lessons or performing much anymore? Is there a method to follow to maintain and continue to grow, especially if I hope to perform again in the future?
Well, I think I kind of went over that earlier. Like I said,
Yeah.
scales. If you're not doing scales, then you need to be doing. If that's the only thing you do. The other thing, of course, is like I said before. This get this subject book. Get
Mm.
the big subject book
Is that
and
what it's called?
start.
The big subject book? Is that what it's
No,
called?
it's called the essential subject.
The
I call
essentials.
it
Okay.
the big subject book. It's called the essential subject.
Okay.
It's just it was put together by Andre Granat and Stephen Ships.
Is that online? Like if I look it up online on Amazon, will I be able to find that, do you think?
Yeah, you should be able to. I got it from Shar Music. If anyone knows
Yeah.
where that is,
I'll
that's
I'll
probably a better place
try
to
and
buy
find
it
a
than.
link it in the description if I can find it.
Yeah. Shar Music would probably be where I buy it. I've always bought stuff from Shar Music,
Yeah. They're
but
great.
yeah. So yeah, that's where I bought it from. It's like $40, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just go
Awesome.
through that and just start. Very slowly. You don't have to do the complicated exercises. Just start going through some of the simple stuff, just little bits of it every day.
Yeah.
So,
Amazing, amazing. Love that. Last question. What is your recommendation on violin lesson books?
what do you mean by that?
I think she's learning online.
Like method, but I really don't. I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with any teacher self books. I really am not.
Yeah.
So I really
Even
can't
the
answer.
courses online, I'm like, I'm not sure which ones are the best ones. It's kind of hard
Yeah,
to
I've
say.
never really looked. I have been slowly trying to actually develop my own, but I have no. Like again, that's the thing with my time right now. It's very difficult to actually
That's so true.
to do it. So like I've actually tried doing it multiple times, and every time I come, I'm like, yeah, this isn't good enough, and
Yeah.
I scrap the project, and then I come
Literally
back
same.
to it later.
Literally same.
So yeah, I mean, maybe I'll have one out at some point that you should check out. But I have, like I said, I don't have a timeline for that. I've just been slowly, occasionally trying to do it. So
But do you teach your students through the Suzuki method?
kind of. I use
Yeah.
the Suzuki repertoire largely because
Yeah.
I grew up with it, so I'm very familiar with it. I use certain. I did all the Suzuki training. I'm familiar with various aspects. I use various aspects of this. I use some of the ear training stuff. I do start teaching note reading a lot sooner
Yeah.
than a lot of Suzuki teachers. So I don't, uh, you know, go by everything in the Suzuki method, but I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of good there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good there. So and also the books are really anyone can get a hold of the books.
Yeah.
But anyone in the world can get a hold of those books almost. So it's just solid repertoire too. It's good music
Yeah.
for students to learn. So it's just what I stick to typically. And of course, if somebody's out of the if somebody's a little bit more advanced, they don't need to be in the books. Then we just decide what repertoire we're going to do outside of that. But
Absolutely. Love that. Love that. Okay. Lastly, where can people find you online? And if they want to learn from you or your studio, where can they find you? How do they do that?
obviously, my YouTube channel, Murphy Music Academy, that shouldn't be too difficult
Plug it.
to find. Uh, obviously, murphymusicacademy.org. That is the school website. You may or may not be able to study with me. It really depends on whether or not I have time. Don't always have time to fit people in. Um, but we have other teachers, right?
Awesome.
Teachers that are personally picked by me. Most of the, currently all of my teachers are from aside from my sister who teaches viola for me, they're all people that study with like the same people I studied with. So
I love that. Everyone's gonna have a very similar mindset and teaching
yeah, I
style.
mean, and I'm not like I don't. That's not a rule. That's just kind of how it worked
Right.
out because I hire people based on like recommendations from other people I've hired, and they usually know other people that
Yeah.
studied with the same teacher. So
Love that.
right now, if you wanted to, and I highly recommend all of the people I've hired. Of course, I wouldn't have hired them. So, if you want online violin lessons and you had your heart set on studying with me and that's not available, then I would still highly recommend studying with some of the other people that we've hired. And also, they charge less. So,
There you go. Love that. I'll link your I think I can link your YouTube channel in the description as well as your website and all that kind of stuff where they can find you. Do you
mhm.
have Instagram too? Should I link that as
I
well?
do. I never use it. Like
Dabble with it?
I haven't. I'm not a social media. I mean, you can go to. You can. It's still there. Like you can follow me on Instagram all you want. I used to post like my YouTube shorts there.
Yeah.
I have TikTok too. I did the same thing, but like I said, I never really use it. I might
YouTube's very
decide to start trying to do stuff with it again.
yeah.
It's just I've never been a big social media guy. YouTube was always my thing. Like if I was spending time online, it was always YouTube because it's educational and that's fun. But
Right.
yeah, I just not a big social media guy.
It's a lot to keep up with, okay?
It's too yeah, I know. That's why I don't know. I just don't have time for that. I don't know how people have time for that.
I know.
I really don't.
It's a lot. It's a lot for sure. But I'll link then your YouTube channel, your website, and all those things. If anybody wants to study with you, yeah, that sounds awesome. Any last things? Thank you so much for
No,
joining.
no. This has been fun. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I know it's so late, so I'm so thankful for you coming on
It's
this
it's
late.
it's actually early. I'm in Utah, so I think it's earlier than you
Oh,
are.
I don't know what time in Utah's on, but great.
It's a mountain time.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So it's not quite so late for you.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I used to be in Michigan, so it would have been late. But no, no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. It's 9 o'clock at this point here, but it's
Yeah,
this is where we're at. Well, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. It was so nice to meet you and get to chat and hear more about everything. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has been great.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Corey.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.